Hi guys! If you watched my last video, then you will have a notion of what I'm going to be talking about in this one. I was kind of introducing you to the new sort of spiritual mentoring focus that I'm giving to Heart Story and the Heart Story Etsy shop tarot reading options. And alongside this, I've been getting really excited about the idea of talking more about developing your own spiritual path. A lot of the blog and video content that I've put out there in the world so far has been quite discursive and maybe either focusing on my own practice and the development of my own practice and the thoughts that I'm having about it, or it's been kind of very general, talking about self-development and emotional well-being and that kind of thing. Any kind of videos where I feel like I'm positing any advice or offering any guidance has generally speaking been quite broad. Like I say, more in the realm of kind of self-development, personal development, spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, that kind of thing, rather than being sort of talking more specifically about spiritual practice in general, or how people in general might actually go about developing a spiritual practice. And I realise that this is actually a pretty gaping hole in my content, because this is something that I'm really excited about talking to people about, but for some reason I've been holding back. And maybe it's because I felt up to now that I really wasn't qualified to talk about, to offer advice on how to build your own spiritual practice, because I'm still building my own spiritual practice. But I've come to realise that actually I think I'm probably the kind of person, and a lot of people who do pave their own spiritual path are these kinds of people that it's always going to be developing and evolving. It's always going to feel like it's still getting there, it's still developing. So I definitely have amassed a wealth of knowledge and experience in figuring things out for myself, and I would definitely like to start talking to you guys more explicitly about that, and just discussing various topics that might be of interest and positing a bit of advice and a bit of guidance. So I've decided to start a new series on the blog and on the video channel. I'm going to be they won't necessarily completely mirror each other, but there will be a lot of the same kind of content going down on both, and they won't be necessarily the same week or whatever, it might be a bit staggered. But over the next couple of weeks, probably quite a few weeks up to Christmas and maybe even beyond, I'm going to be focusing on this series called Paving Your Own Path. So paving your own spiritual path, in essence. And yeah, I'm really excited about this. I have loads of ideas so far about what kind of videos and blog posts that I'm going to write and make. But if anyone has any questions or things that you want me to focus on, or questions you want me to answer, I'm more than willing to dive into that as well. I'm probably going to continue to make some other videos in other series like Tarot of the Gods. I know I haven't made one in a while and stuff like that, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on this series, Paving Your Own Path, because this is something that a lot of people in the pagan community do. It's something that earth-based spiritualities in general, they're not affiliated, generally speaking, with any major religions, and basically people who come to earth-based spiritualities or various forms of paganism, a lot of the time we're coming to it really fresh and really not having any prior knowledge or experience of it, and also we're not necessarily being kind of indoctrinated into a strict new religion. And while there are traditions and various groups and covens and stuff that you can join when you do come into these, when you do discover these new spiritual paths, an awful lot of people in the pagan community and generally the earth-based spiritual community, an awful lot of people end up sort of just going their own way with it. And there are various reasons for this. The main reason, I think, is that lack of a central cohesive core. There's no central text, there's no central dogma, there is no one kind of religion. There is Wicca, but even Wicca itself is quite diverse. It has so many different traditions involved, and many people are solitary rather than being involved in group practice. Some people will occasionally go to a group event and some people don't at all. And another reason for this, of course, is that there are not that many of us. There are an awful lot more Christians in Europe and the US, for example, and other religions, other major religions, than there are pagans or earth-based spiritual people. And basically a lot of the time we don't have the opportunity to practice in a group. So we are faced for the first time probably in our lives with having to develop a spiritual practice at home. And a lot of the time we've never done this before. Even if we've grown up in a family where we say the rosary or we say prayers at night and stuff like that, we haven't really had, all that has been kind of taught to us. We know exactly what we have to do. There are clear outlined steps of what has to be done every day. And to be honest, most of us, I think, or a lot of us anyway, have not even grown up with that level of structure in a sort of home daily practice. Certainly when I was growing up, I went to mass every week for less than 10 years, maybe 7 or 8 years, but there was definitely absolutely no religious practice done at home whatsoever, because my parents were, my mother is pretty agnostic, and my father has different religious beliefs. He probably has similar religious beliefs to mine, but the Catholic paradigm just kind of, he can fit his beliefs into that kind of symbolic structure. So there was very definitely no sense of kind of evening prayers or daily prayers or anything like that. So I very much came into this idea of doing religious practice at home, completely new. And I think for a lot of people it is the same. So that can be quite daunting. A lot of people who come into paganism and earth-based spiritual practices, they also do this because they want to feel free to do their own thing. They've been shoved into a religion that didn't feel right for them for too long, and they kind of go, no, this isn't what I want. I believe in this, and I want to have the freedom to express that in whatever way that I choose. So whatever way that you're coming to paganism or an earth-based spiritual practice, no matter what way you look at it, it is a daunting prospect, because you either have to find a group to slot yourself into or a label to fit yourself into, or you just have to completely start from scratch, build up your own beliefs and your own practices and your own systems, just from everything that you read or learn about what other people do. And either way, it is pretty daunting. A conversation that came up in the pagan community online recently, actually, well, maybe about 6 months ago, was the question of labels and how relevant they really are, how much importance we should really place on them. And the general consensus was sort of that labels, that they're not important and that we shouldn't place too much weight on them. But thinking about that, I can understand why in the pagan earth-based spirituality community that the question of labels is particularly potent, because of this thing where an awful lot of people aren't actually involved in any one particular group or tradition. They don't have a set of religious practices and beliefs that they can sort of identify with and feel like, yes, this is a part of my identity. I am X, I am Y. So actually having a couple of labels that people can apply to themselves is very important, because part of religious identity, part of figuring out your spiritual beliefs and that kind of thing, it does tie in with an attempt to build up your own personal identity. And being able to label your spirituality is important, because that's how we kind of build up the ego, builds up its identity, and and feels as though it's sort of solid in that identity. It knows what it is. You can kind of say to yourself, I know what I am spiritually because I am a whatever. I'm a Wiccan, I'm a green witch, I'm a heathen, whatever that label is, a pantheist, whatever it is. So I can definitely understand that impulse. And I definitely think it's a great thing when people are able to find a label or a group or a tradition that they really kind of slot in with. Sometimes people just move from one kind of traditional religion into basically another, like a new religion, and they go along with it and it just works for them. They are happy to have, to follow, say with Wicca, you might have to kind of figure out yourself which tradition you want to go with and which books you want to read, and which bits you want to take in for yourself. But you might be happy enough to go along with the kind of designated outline for Wicca, the designated circle casting. You might want to pick a circle casting method that you find in a book or through a teacher. You might want to lay out your altar in the way of that tradition, and so on and so forth. And for a lot of people that is a lot easier. It is a lot easier to go along with a ready-made method. But there are two sides to this. I mean, on the one hand, even if you are going along with a ready-made method when it comes to paganism and earth-based spiritual practices, you will have to do a bit of weeding yourself, generally speaking, unless you just walk into a coven, you get taught from the ground up, and this is just how you do things. And most of the time, even in that situation, and those traditions will encourage you to kind of go away and experience your own spiritual expression. They will encourage they will encourage you to kind of have your own ideas about things, to have your own spiritual gnosis. And then on the other hand, you might find yourself feeling as though there is something missing, that you've just moved into this sort of new spiritual arena, and you've been handed all these new spiritual tools, and you're kind of going, okay, so at least what I'm doing now, or these beliefs are more in line with what I feel, and these practices feel more in line with how I see the world and what I want to be doing spiritually, but it's feeling a bit hollow. It's not quite me. And I think that basically when you're moving away from a traditional religion into paganism or other kinds of alternative religious practices, you're being offered this opportunity to start fresh and build up your own spiritual practice. And I think it's important to do this because you're mixing in a community where the emphasis is always on finding your own way and doing your own work. And you can, if you feel like you're just grasping at straws, it's probably that you haven't actually spent enough time really getting to grips with what you actually really believe. And maybe the symbolism and the practices that you're working with are just not quite right for you, and there might actually be something that will click with you better. Essentially, I see like an earth-based spiritual practice as just this amazing opportunity to be as creative and put as much of yourself into your spiritual practice as you possibly can. The world is your oyster. Like, you can absolutely do whatever you want in this because it is a personal spiritual practice. If you're a solitary practitioner, you can do whatever you want. You can do absolutely anything you want within that spiritual context, and within reason, of course, within ethical reason. And I think it's a shame really to hold yourself back with that, and to feel like you don't have the freedom or that you don't know where to start with really putting yourself into that spiritual practice. So yeah, there are so many different tangled questions to look at when it comes to this question of paving your own path, and I'm really interested to start talking about these. I'm going to be talking about some practical things like developing ritual, developing a spiritual practice, communing with deities, and then I'm going to be kind of talking about things like solidifying your idea of divinity, and solidifying what you actually believe about divinity. What is the divine? Where is it? What does it look like? Is it immanent? Is it transcendent? Really kind of narrowing in on your world belief and what sounds most right for you. You might kind of feel like, well, oh, I don't know, it could be this, it could be that, but I think what's important is really finding a kind of a set of symbols and a symbolic structure that resonates with you. And it doesn't matter really if you think, well, this might not be, literally true. The most important thing is that it really, really resonates with you, and that it is in line with what you believe intellectually to be true as well. And you kind of have to have the two things going on, that your kind of creative mind is lighting up when you think about the world in this way, but also that your intellectual mind is going, yeah, that reflects how I understand things to work. So there are so many different topics when it comes to teasing out your core beliefs and figuring out which core beliefs you need to run with. And sometimes there are core beliefs that it's time to let go, and you are able to let go, and that you think you're kind of holding on to them because you think you need to believe them. But sometimes if you find that there's a kind of conflicting set of beliefs within you, you can hold that conflict and you can work with that conflict, and that is okay, and that can be part of your spiritual life as well. But you can always let one of them go if that is what is right for you. So yeah, there's a lot more to come on this. So many difficulties, but so many joys when it comes to building your own path. And like I said, if you have any particular topics that you want me to focus on, then I absolutely will. I am going to be looking mostly at developing your own spiritual path in the context of an earth-based spirituality. I won't say paganism because it's such a tangled term, and I also am going to be looking at earth-based spiritualities rather than say hard polytheism and things like that, because that's my experience, that's my starting point. And I find that the majority of people in the pagan community who are kind of completely solitary and who really are building up their own practice from scratch rather than following a tradition tend to be earth-based. There are a lot of sort of ceremonial magicians and things like that floating around the community as well, but they tend to be obviously a lot more taken with tradition and following certain texts and stuff like that. So I feel like that's a whole other side of paganism that I'm really not familiar with at all, and isn't so relevant when it comes to this question of paving your own path and needing help paving your own path. So I hope this series is going to be interesting for you guys. Yeah, any comments or suggestions are more than welcome. I'm really excited about it because I feel like I'm actually finally going to be talking about some of the key concepts that I've been kind of itching to get to grips with for a long time on the channel. I have no idea why I haven't done this sooner. So yeah, watch this space and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.